Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flight Lieutenant Madeline Edwards. We warmly welcome Air Commodore retired Dr. Mark Lax, representing the Air Force Association. As always, we welcome veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
For those that are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament. Flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Verne Edward Cockroft, who was killed during the Second World War. Verne Cockroft was born on the 23rd of October 1919 in Rockhampton, Queensland, to Harry and Emma Cockroft. His father was a motor mechanic. Verne attended Buranda State School and was fond of cricket, swimming and football. After leaving school, he found work as a clerk. Having enrolled in the reserve in September 1941, Cockroft enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 25th of April 1942, aged 22. He trained as a navigator and a year later was made sergeant. Cockroft embarked for overseas service from Sydney on the 25th of May 1943, arriving in the UK in July. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, air gunners, and flight engineers who joined Australian and British squadrons in Britain throughout the course of the war. Further specialist training followed in England, and in October, Cockroft was promoted to Flight Sergeant. On the 6th of June 1944, he was posted to number 467 Squadron RAAF. As part of Bomber Command, the squadron flew the four-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. On the night of the 7th of July 1944, Bomber Command launched a major raid on an abandoned underground quarry near Paris, where German flying bombs, known as buzz bombs and doodlebugs, were stored. Cockroft was the bomb aimer aboard Lancaster POU, which took off shortly before 10:30 p.m. Cloud cover meant that the bombers had to fly lower to see the target, with the result that 31 Lancasters were shot down by enemy fire. One of those aircraft that never returned to base was Cockroft's, which crashed at the town of Courjon, about 95 kilometres southwest of the target. There were no survivors. Those killed with Flight Sergeant Cockroft were Australians, Flying Officer Philip Ryan, Warrant Officer Clifford Jones, Flight Sergeants Leonard Porritt and James Steffen, and Sergeant William Kilworth, along with British Sergeant George Hayes. The airmen were buried by the townspeople in a moving ceremony. After the war, the remains of Flight Sergeant Cockroft were identified and reinterred there under the inscription, "Dauntless you leapt to heights untold, dying you live forever beloved." He was 24 years old. For years afterwards, the people of Courjon held annual ceremonies at the cemetery in honour of the killed airmen, and a monument was erected there in 1951. Verne Cockroft was dearly missed by his family and friends, who placed in memoriam notices in the newspapers after his death. One inserted by friends read, "Today recalls sad memories of a loved one gone to rest, and those who think of him today are those who loved him best." Cockroft's brother Keith also served in the Second World War and returned home safely. Flight Sergeant Verne Cockroft's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Verne Edward Cockroft, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.